Hello, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. My name is Gavin Morris, and I'm the director of the South African Jewish Museum, and welcome to Community History Online. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the first of a three-part series of webinars, which, as we've entitled Community History Online, will be about sharing the various projects that people are doing relating to South African Jewish history in the online space. This series is being hosted by the SA Jewish Museum in conjunction with the Kaplan Center for Jewish Studies at UCT. But it would not have become possible if it were not for the effort and commitment of two of today's speakers, Geraldine Aberbach and Eli Rabinovitz. Geraldine is a member of the Order of the British Empire. She studied art and teaching at Wits and at UCT. She taught art in London and has created many platforms for Jewish cultural activity, including the Jewish Music Institute, Simcha on the Square, the European Cantors Association, and the International Forum for Jewish Music Studies. Geraldine will speak to us today about how she kept the now dispersed Jewish community of Kimberley together through regular newsletters, sharing insights and memories of one of the first and most influential Jewish communities in South Africa. Eli is a board member of the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies. He manages 85 Kahila link websites for Jewish Gen, which facilitate web pages commemorating the places where Jews have lived. Kahila Links provides the opportunity for anyone who's interested in a place to create a web page about that community. I want to thank both of them for helping us bring this webinar series to fruition. This series came about through conversations had between Geraldine, Eli, Professor Adam Mendelsohn at the Kaplan Center, Leila Bloch and Katie Garin, the archivists at the SA Jewish Museum and the Kaplan Center respectively, and myself. We had these conversations over the past few months, and we came to the realization that there are many people who are interested and active in keeping their community history and heritage alive, but needed to create a space to connect all these people. It's no secret that the South African Jewish community has shrunk considerably and that our demographics have forever shifted. A multitude of communities and congregations in South Africa no longer exist, yet the people who grew up in these communities are actively trying to keep these memories alive using the internet and other digital technologies to maintain connections and share memories. Geraldine and Eli are two such people. Similarly, the SA Jewish Museum and the Kaplan Center are also dedicated to the task of securing our communal history. In our conversations, it became apparent there are a number of different approaches that people have taken in trying to keep these memories alive. Newsletters, Facebook pages, genealogical databases, family trees, archives, websites, and many more. It is also clear that many of us are working in silos, each focused on his or her own particular area of interest or approach. We felt it was important to bring these dedicated people together to form a community and create a space where we can all learn from each other. I think it's fair to say that all of us have the same goal at heart, and that coming together and building a network will benefit us all. So that is how Community History Online was born. This initial series of 3 webinars will each present a different approach taken to bringing South African Jewish history into the online space. Each speaker will talk about the particular projects that they're involved in. They will share their motivations for undertaking their respective projects, the reasons for the approach that they have taken, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Ultimately, we hope that these presentations will inspire and assist you in your own projects and help you connect with others who share your passion. Today's session, being the first in the series, will fittingly feature the projects that Geraldine and Eli have undertaken. We'll also have a presentation by Leila Bloch, the archivist chair at the South African Jewish Museum, who will give an overview of the approach that the museum has taken in developing our own archive. Next week's session will include a presentation by Gary Sussman, who has built a website to commemorate the community of Freiburg, where he grew up. Rabbi Ryan Newman from Musenburg Shul will talk about how he has used Zoom to build connections with people within and beyond his congregation. And JP Burke will give a case study presentation of how he and members of the now defunct Woodstock and Salt River Hebrew congregation are working to secure the history of this community. In the final session of the first iteration of this series, we will hear from David Bloom in Israel, who has utilized Facebook to keep the Zimbabwean Jewish community active and connected. Eric Berger will talk to us about how the Cape Town Jewish Cemeteries Board built an innovative cemetery website to connect family members from afar to the final resting places of their loved ones. This is something that takes on a special significance given this time of the COVID pandemic. And finally, we'll hear from Katie Garron, the archivist at the New Jewish Archive at the Kaplan Center, and she'll give us an overview of the key aspects of our communal history that are secured there, as well as share with you the resources developed and held by the Kaplan Center that are available to help you with your own research. I must stress, though, and I cannot underline this enough, that we're only just scratching the surface of the available resources, approaches, and people involved in this space. We've not touched on genealogy or heard from researchers tracking family histories and many other worthy projects. It is our hope and expectation that this series will continue further. We'll have more sessions in the future, so please let us hear from you. Tell us about the projects that you're working on. The whole idea of Community History Online is to build a like-minded community and share resources and expertise. If you are inspired by what you hear over the next 3 weeks, contact us and we'll provide a platform for you to share your stories of your projects. We'll connect you with others who may be able to help. And in short, we'll build a network and a community. Now, before I hand over to Geraldine to start us off on our little journey, I want to explain how this webinar is going to work. Each of the 3 speakers will be given 15 to 20 minutes to present their project. Thereafter, there will be a Q&A panel, which I'll moderate, where you're welcome to ask any or all of the panelists any questions that you may have. So please place your questions in the Q&A field below. And if your question is for a specific speaker, please just note who it's aimed at. Once all 3 have spoken, I will start the Q&A. And finally, if you know of anyone who would be interested in this and has not had the opportunity to see today's webinar, it will be recorded. The recording will be found on the South African Jewish Museum's Facebook page. And be sure to go there and you'll be able to register via the South African Jewish Museum's website as well if you'd like to join the remaining sessions. With that said, welcome. I hope everybody enjoys it. And I'm going to hand over to Geraldine right now to give us our first presentation for Community History Online. Over to you, Geraldine.
Thank you so much, Gavin. And thank you so much for what you've done to help this little entity come to life. It's been really extraordinary. So I really happy to kick this off, to be the first one to speak in this series. I can't see my face on the screen, but maybe you can, I don't know. So you can
see you, don't worry.
Okay, I can't see me. Now, so Gavin talks about motivation. I'm not sure what my motivation is, but Kimberley was such an important place, and it's been fascinating to do this. So we are not looking back in nostalgia. You know, Jewish people have always been on the move, as Gavin has said. They've always looked for opportunities, up sticks, moved to wherever better opportunities would arise. And they never looked back. They only looked forward. And if the opportunities ran dry in a particular area, they moved off again. And I feel we're also not looking back in nostalgia. What we're doing is commemorating and celebrating the wonderful men and women who grasped those opportunities and who were working at the cutting edge of the society as they saw it at the time. We are appreciating for the first time the hardships and the sheer hard work they had in coming to South Africa, in arriving, you know the story, without speaking the language and finding ways to make a living for their families. And that's the story that we're celebrating in this. And so we're not looking back, we're looking forward. And I thought I could share with you what you need to do if you wanted to make bring your community back to life. You need just 4 things. You need a driver, somebody who's going to actually see this thing through and make it happen. That's the most important. They're all very important. Then you need to collect an email list of all the people or their descendants that you can find. And you're not going to have them all, but each time you do something, you're going to collect more and more. Then you need a way of communicating with them. This could be by a newsletter, this could be by phone calls, this could be Facebook pages. Preferably it should be all 3 as it develops, because certain people like to communicate in different ways. And then fourthly, you need the repository of all this information. And this is where the website comes in, because with all the comings and goings and there needs to be some central place where everything resides. So I was very fortunate to be introduced to Eli Rabinovitz, who has been making websites for Kahila links, mainly started in Eastern Europe for communities that weren't so lucky to move on, that had a much worse ending. But he started also to commemorate and and he will talk to you about what he's done. But I was extremely lucky, and also lucky that he came through London that weekend and we sat down together to work out a template for and I would like to share my screen, if I've got the permission to do that, to show you what I think we need to do for a website. So here we are on the home page with, and I just want to warn you, don't try and read it, because I will be scrolling around and you'll get frustrated. But rest assured, it's there on the internet, free day and night for you to peruse at your leisure. So this is just for looking, not for reading. My husband said I should tell you that, because otherwise you'll be very frustrated. So the homepage, I think, needs to have an iconic picture. And this is the picture that I was sitting against, which is the Kimberley Synagogue. Kimberley Synagogue was built at the heyday of the diamond bonanza. And there were several rich Jewish people in Kimberley who felt they needed an opulent synagogue. And it really is a very beautiful synagogue. It was built during the Boer War. Every piece of brick or timber had to have a military stamp on it. Opened in 1902. The homepage should welcome people to the website. I've got a separate about page, but you could put that together. It should say who is presenting the website, what they expect people to do, shows you what you can find. And you could also put various bits about, where Kimberley is, etc. And Eli's been wonderful in building this website for us. Then clearly you need to look at your community. So here I would learn from others about how to arrange the community. Certainly there needs to be a timeline. There needs to be a history of when the community started and how it went on. And here we've got a timeline from 1868 to 1911, the various landmarks, which don't try and read. we also, I've just got a list of things, but you know, if you've got drop-down menus, you may divide it into sacred things and secular things. So we've got here, I've got the opportunity to read an article about 100 years of the community, which was written obviously on the anniversary, and it's there, you click that. We've got how the community celebrated the 110th anniversary, where they had a conference with the African Jewish Congress. We've got on here Moshe Silberhaft's chapter on Kimberley. We've got SABC footage of the Kimberley celebrations. We've got Leon Chonen's written about maintaining a kosher home in Kimberley, Jewish education in Kimberley, business activities and achievements. Then synagogues, well, we've got a separate page for synagogues and other stuff as well, and a link to the Facebook pages. If we just went, say, to business activities, this is something that Leon wrote about, worked out what all the people in Kimberley were doing. And we have a very interesting table of the businesses, who they were, what kind of business they were involved with, what the name was, where it was, whether it's still operational or when it was. So, you know, that's a really excellent way of knowing quickly what everybody did in Kimberley. Then clearly synagogues is a big thing. So Kimberley's had 3 synagogues. This is all the same one, by the way, in different periods. Interesting for me was here, no palm trees. You can see the whole building. Here, you've got palm trees growing, and here the palm trees are so big you can't see these 2 towers at all. But the Kimberley community aren't interested in pruning their palm trees. We've tried always to keep the Kimberley community as part of this. We've appointed the president and the chairman as patrons of the website, and we hope they enjoy it. Now, here's stories about particular ministers that we've had.
Geraldine, we've lost you. Can you hear us?
You've lost, what have you lost? I can hear you. I'm still seeing you. Have you still lost me?
I can hear you, Geraldine, Eli.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll carry on. So various ministers have got stories longer or shorter as we find them. And this is something that gathers, you know. I was not an expert on Kimberley. You don't have to be an expert to do this. You just have to have the interest, because I learned so much. I didn't know anything. I didn't know that Kimberley had 2 separate communities. I knew there were 2 shuls when I was a child, but I thought one was the old shul and one was the new shul. I was very wrong, and you'll have to read about what the difference was. Cemeteries, I feel, is very important, because when communities are spread around the world, it's very difficult to visit graves, and especially when your family are only in the cemetery, the chances of going to Kimberley are quite small. So, you know, while cemeteries are available and pristine, I think it's really important to photograph them, to transcribe what's on the tombstones, and have it available for people to access from wherever they are. And I'm really thrilled that the Cape Town Jewish Cemeteries Board are going to be speaking in this series, because they have done an absolutely wonderful job where you can go and visit your grave of your family, you can leave a stone, You can even buy a leaf which helps the upkeep of the cemetery, the real cemetery. So I'm really glad about this. We were quite lucky in finding that John O'David had photographed the graves. So you can actually see them all, but, you know, you would have to buy the photograph and be able to see it properly. And so, you know, it's not ideal, but it's certainly better than nothing for the moment to have these stones. Families. Now, we started off with stories of about 5 families, you know, and now look what we've got. We've got over 100 families. Now, some are short stories, and some are stories that actually reflect Kimberley, that reflect the whole history of what happened in Kimberley, the business history, the you know, what happened, how it developed. And you can see this in the Golden Boom program, a family program. So we've got Lionel Giorno was one of the Jewish mayors of Kimberley, and Milton has sent a story of his family, which, you know, shows their interests, the things they did, and that's a nice picture we were looking for. That was Lionel. So families, you know, I've learned so much. I knew very little about all. I left Kimberley at 16, you know, after school, as one did in those days, to go to university, and basically, apart from holidays, never came back. But I've learned, and what I've learned is that so many people have felt that they've learned and that they've found out things and that they've gone back to their drawers of photographs and cuttings and put it together, and they feel so happy that they've got something to show their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. There's a whole section on pioneers of Kimberley, and here is somebody that I really would commend you to have a look at, Alfred Beit. Everybody knows Cecil Rhodes, everybody knows Barney Bernardo. People don't know Alfred Beit, who was Cecil Rhodes' right-hand man. There were a lot of German diamond firms and European diamond firms in Kimberley, and they realized that you had to amalgamate the mines and control the supply of diamonds, and that if you didn't do that, then they would be worth nothing. So the German fraternity were planning on this, and so was Rhodes. And the German fraternity realized that they needed to back Rhodes, because Rhodes was the politician, the prime minister, the flair, the driving force, the person, the Oxford graduate who would get it done. So it was Beit that made it happen for Rhodes. And in my story, in looking at Alfred Beit, is the story of Kimberley. And this story shows, you know, his great friendship with Rhodes, and also brings out the story of Porges, Jules Porges, who was a very rich jeweler in Europe. And it was Porges. If people don't know about Beit, they know nothing about Porges, who was behind Beit. And it was Porges who brought out Beit and Julius Werner, and actually set the scene for a proper industry in diamonds, and then, of course, in gold, because it was the Kimberley finance and the Kimberley expertise that opened up the gold mines. So if you've got the time, I really think you'd enjoy reading the story about Alfred Beit. we have articles. So we've written about the Jewish community of Uppington, because the Uppington boys used to come to school in Kimberley. And of course, Uppington have done their own little website, which you can see linked from here also. We've written a story about wholesalers. We've written a story about Jabotinsky's visit to Kimberley, about the Spanish flu in Kimberley. And a story about Smosa, and there was a very sad story about Smosa in Kimberley. And also Alexandersfontein. This was a very, like a country club for Kimberley, which I never knew, because by my time it wasn't really operation, but this is where people went for dances and this kind of thing. Kimberley Jews in the Second World War. This has been a really thing that's taken me about 3 or 4 years to assemble the stories of what happened. About 50 men and women in Kimberley signed up and went up north. What was up north? What was going on there? We've heard these words: Tobruk, Benghazi, Mogadishu, El Alamein, Monte Cassino. Here we've actually worked out the stories, here are all the stories of the people who signed up. This is what the South African Army did. Here is Joe Friedman, who became a judge in Durban, sending himself the little book of Jewish thoughts that went with every sailor, because not only was he a Sergeant Friedman going on service, but he was the secretary of the synagogue. And so we have the pictures of the airmen and the stories of their bomber, what they were. They were bomber or Spitfire flyers, or where they were, some were with the RAF, some were with the South African Air Force. And of course there was in Kimberley an Air Force training school. So they trained pilots in Kimberley. And we've put all these stories together, and it's really fascinating. Some were decorated, some had medals, some were wounded, some were taken prisoner. And we really got to grips with the horror of what they had. And here's a lovely picture. This is Ivor Haas, whose son sent the picture, and he didn't know who these other people were. But because we send out our newsletters often and everything, somebody said, oh, that's my dad, Charlie Hotz, and this is Harry Klein, and this is Kanashevsky. So we found who all these people are. And so communicating with people is a really special thing. And now the other thing, as I said, we write newsletters. So all the newsletters are here. I've written 41 so far, and some have had guest editors. Leon Chonin has written some, and it started in August 2013. And these are stories of Kimberley, which are also interesting, and every newsletter links to the place on the website where everything is. So there are lots of cross links, and you find things where they are. And interestingly enough, I found just last month, and I'm just going to share a different screen with you, if I may, and that is I found an article in my a box of my father's memorabilia. As I said, I didn't know what motivation I had, but here is this little article that says Jewish service personnel welcomed home, function in the Constance Hall. So it reads that my father, Dr. Noel Kretzmar, was the president of the community at the time, and they arranged this event, and he stood up and made a speech of how happy they were to welcome these people home and how they'd longed for this day and how happy they were that they'd come home to their families. And he finished his speech by saying, they formed a part of a young force and were comparatively lightly armed. They faced an enemy seemingly oblivious to the rules of international warfare. But their deeds throughout their many campaigns up north and as part of the 6th Division would be written in the annals of the Jewish community. Now, how did he know, I wonder? Or for that matter, how did I know that one day his daughter would reach out to all the families of all those people and compile the individual stories of those soldiers, sailors, and airmen from the memories and pictures contributed by their children and grandchildren, and that she would one day make a website to highlight and memorialize and make the annals of the Jewish community. So I leave you with that and saying, you know, we are still feeling our way, but it's wonderful that we've come together to share our experiences. And maybe we can provide together something that is the best practice or make it easy for you. So I hope that you found this interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gary. You have Gavin, sorry. So shall I hand straight on to Eli?
Well, I'm here.
Okay, so I'll stop my share.
Yeah.
There you are. It's over to you.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Let's see. Well, this was the one we clicked on before. So we've got the opening screen. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Thumbs up, Geraldine in London. Eli's in Perth. That's close enough for the two of us. We get on like a house on fire. And we're very creative together, especially Geraldine. And we get all the things that we want to get out to people. And I think it's been just the most amazing experience working with her. I'm also going to show you slides. I'm going to try and get in and out of some that I might get lost. So don't worry about that. Whoops. I'll just go back to the first one. And the slides I'm going to show also aren't meant to be read. I'm just going to show you the slides, run you through them. And the good news is whoever wants this PowerPoint, which has got links and beautiful journeys on them for you, you're welcome to write to the museum and we will send you a PowerPoint. And so that's basically who I am. I've got a foundation called We Are Here Foundation. These are lovely people in Perth at Carmel School, which is our Jewish day school. That's lovely Geraldine. I'm not going to say much more about Geraldine because she's an absolute star and there she's giving me directions. The next one is the South African Jewish Museum, which I visited many times on my visits to Cape Town, together with the Garden Shul. And that's the Kaplan Center. So there are links in here and resources in here where I've put them up there so that when you want to go and research your stuff and also do a web page or work with somebody, at least you've got some good resources to work off from here. Okay, so these are just a few questions that I've posed or just little pointers for myself. So again, I'm not really going to go into them, but you will see some names like Lichtbach's, SIG Org, and DOJR, you don't know, but I'm going to tell you about SA SIG, Roots Bank, etc. Those things are very important in the work that I do in terms of connecting with the world, because I live very far away from the rest of you guys. So I just, Gavin mentioned, so I'm the only non-US person on this board, which is a board of all the, it's an umbrella organization of all the different genealogical organizations, and they run the famous IARGIS conference every year. Last year it was virtual, this year it's virtual. Hopefully next year it will be back in Philadelphia. But what I want to say about the associate members of IARGIS, they've got 91 different Jewish genealogical societies that make up them, but that the power of this organization, if you see, for example, Geshe Galicia, Litvak Sig, Jewish Records Indexing Poland, Jewish Gen, MyHeritage, those are the powerhouses of Jewish genealogical societies. And very important to know that if you want to look for resources, those are the kind of places where you want to go to, okay? So the next one is something that hasn't eventuated yet, but it's going to be most probably the biggest of everything, called DOJRW or DOJR, and that is a group of these organizations have got together, and they're just going to have a worldwide project which all the other genealogical societies will link into. So it will be one massive database. And we've got some very powerful people behind there. I'm not there, but the powerful people behind there is going to make this work. So I would say that watch out for DAJR. Okay. The next thing is I want to talk about Jewish Gen, because Jewish Gen is the mode or the form that I've taken in terms of doing web pages initially, but there are other alternates. But the important thing about Jewish Gen are, if we go to the next screen, is that Jewish Gen is associated with the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York, and many of you might know that, a very important museum. Even more important is they work with, and they're in partnership with Ancestry.com, which is, in many people's eyes, the most important genealogical organization. And you know, you need databases, you need computers, you need things to drive this project. And Jewish Gen work with Ancestry.com as their host, if you want to call it. And they have many, in this Comunity 8,000 active volunteers, 21 million Jewish records, hundreds of translated Yiscor, and other things. I think the point I want to make is that there are 500,000 registered users worldwide, and that is very important. And if I drop out, by the way, don't worry, you'll get it, because I just see on my screen, there's just a little note there. The most important thing is that Jewish Gen is the place to go to if you want to research your families and other aspects of the history and of your, not just genealogy, very important. And components of that, for example, are you can find your shtetl, that's a Kahila link. You can find people that belonged in the shtetl, their databases. You can connect with their families. There's a Holocaust database. There's a burial registry. So these things are all very, very important, as much as the country databases, which are, for example, as you can see there, the different countries. So you can focus, okay, on those countries when you want to do your research. Okay, so some of the components that we as South Africans would find very important would be Latvia SIG, Litvak SIG. So these are all tied to each other, but they're not completely independent. But the important thing is you can go to a particular place and look for them, and you can have certain overlaps. The important thing with Jewish Gen is that they've got different aspects. For example, if you've got a story that is a success story, as I've had, finding somebody in the family that got killed in a car crash in 1931, long before I was born, and nobody knew anything, this is where you can tell your stories. And of course, other people can, and you can get inspiration. Okay. JRI Poland is actually the largest of the organizations. So that's obviously people with Polish ancestry. And it's very important to understand that you've got to look at the right place. So if you're Litvak, as most South Africans are, 95% of South Africans are of Litvak heritage, you might find that Poland is not that relevant. But for example, my Zeta came from near Białystok, or Białystok, as they say, and that is very much part of JRI Poland's area, as much as it is of Belarus, because places like Grodno, which are in Belarus today, were in Poland, or Brest, so those things are very important. I just want to bring up as well that is quite relevant are the different platforms that you can use. So while I swear by Jewish Gen, because that's the way I've grown into this kind of world, there are things like, we've got your Wix is one, or Blogger, or Ghost. But the most important in terms of market share of those other platforms is WordPress, which controls 41% of this blogger or markets, okay, for web blogging platforms. So they're very important. And the important thing about WordPress, that is actually quite simple to work with once you know how. So there's just some information on WordPress, on the size of the organization when it was established, so on. Okay. Now, of course, when you're looking for information, you should look for resources. And of course, the Kaplan Center is one of those places. SASIG is another. People like Saul Isroff and Roy August have been pioneers in establishing, and Rabinovitz, I must say as well, who's not South African and not related to me, have been very, very important in terms of building up a group of sites and of connections. So that is crucial for researching. And of course, this was something I just used the other day again, was that Saul Isroff sent this to me because somebody asked me a question, and you can go into the National Archives of South Africa, okay, which is NAIR, I think it's spelled or pronounced NAIRS, and you'd be amazing what you can find in it. And these are all starting points for people who are interested not just in genealogy, but also in stories, because Geraldine and I have worked very well together as she gathers these stories from people from Kimberley, and they're amazing stories, but she makes them even more amazing because she articulates them and writes them up. So there's often a source or a starting point that one can work from. So Kahila links are basically the area that I've lived in, and Kahila links, I think Gavin did define it earlier on, but they used to be called shtetl links, and it really represents the town where there was a community. And it doesn't just mean Lithuania, it means South Africa as well. So if you say a dorp in a little place, my father was born in Volksrust, so that could have been the shtetl or the Kahila that his family came from Poland and Palestine to South Africa. So it's very important to kind of understand the concept and to understand also how we generated our community. So for example, I know that Ivan Kaplan in London has written an amazing book called From the Baltic to the Cape, and that explains very clearly how people got to South Africa, how the news traveled to Lithuania, how they got across borders and landed up in London, etc. So I think that it's all very much a journey, although we often define it in terms of a town, and that's very relevant. Again, is divided into different areas. So obviously there's a South African one, and then there is like when I'm in Australia, but the main ones that we know are Lithuania, which is again on its own, it's categorized on its own. So I look after 88 Kahila links as a volunteer. So I try and find stories from people. Of course, there's nobody that comes near working with Geraldine on Kimberley. It's been a real powerful engine working with her. There are other sites. Musenburg is another site that, as we know, has a good history to it, and a lot of South Africans gravitated there over the holidays and so on. And it's very much Musenburg's an alive community. Also thanks to Rabbi Ryan, which you'll hear about next week. So when we go into the Kahila links, the traditional ones, this was my first one, is in a little town called Orla in Poland near Białystok. And so what I do is I've got a particular way of trying to get people to look at photographs, look at various iconic items that are on that website that then can link into other areas of interest. For example, family trees. So I've got a Mac, so I have a very colorful kind of family tree that's quite attractive and interspersed with photographs of the family. That's my style. You know, everybody can have their own style. I like color. And also, I've been fortunate in traveling to Lithuania and to Poland 11 times from distant Australia. So I take a lot of photographs. I document my trips. The trips with this lady there, for example, is about our two families that connected, but a sad kind of story, and that's the one that you may see in the next page. Yeah. So Abotenu, which is an iconic Jewish genealogical publication, I wrote up that story, and it then got published there and in Jewish Gen and in other places like Genie, etc. And of course, to me, photographs are very important in terms of attracting an interest and attention. This is a website for the town of Plunga or Plungian. Now, another important thing is if you use things like Jewish Gen is to see how many names a particular town had. So if you look here where my mouse is, Plunga, Plungiani, Plungian, etc. And of course, they're very famous people that landed up from Plungian into other places. And it's just quite funny because we talk about, I can't see it there. No, can't see it, don't worry. But for example, Mendel Kaplan would be a very good example of somebody in the 80s and 90s opened Lithuania for South Africans to go on his trips. And I'm going to see if this thing works. Just okay, so I'm going to click on this. Let's hope and pray. And this was just a little video clip. So I like using videos. So my videos go onto something like YouTube. So they can be accessed on YouTube. And then you can also see them on the site themselves. So we're just going to play a short little excerpt of it.
On the 9th of June, 1992, descendants of the Grohl family, the Blocks, Kaplans, and Kuschlicks, returned with friends to the shtetls of their forefathers in Lithuania. Over a period of 4 days, the group visited, with Lithuanian Grohl relative Alexander Yudelis, more than 15 shtetls and cities in Lithuania, before touring the cities of Riga, St. Petersburg, and Moscow, where they joined the Keren HaYesod conference.
You saw a house where the birth and the family 150 years ago, the house is still there, right? Continuity. If you go to the birthplace where I was born, it's not there because of discontinuity of development. Now, there was no development here for 100 years or so. Now they're developing the street. He would not allow them to develop this street until he took a bulldozer, he personally, a bulldozer, and went under the street to see if he could find his rabbi, who was...
Okay, so you can hear the Paro accent. But what is very important is that a document like this was shared with me years after this happened, and we could put it up on the Kahila link. And I think that is crucial. My catchphrase is sharing. If you can share with other people and collaborate with people like I've done with Geraldine, and Geraldine's done with many people, and she does it on things like Zoom meetings as well with Kimberley people. It's a fantastic thing to see people get together and relate their stories, okay? So we go to Jishmeier, which is a place in Lithuania. And Jishmeier is very interesting from the point of view of this lady on the right here, who I spoke to for the first time yesterday. is a Christian, but she had a suspicion about her father, where he was born and who she was. And she did a DNA test and found that her father was actually born, he was swapped at birth with another kid who wasn't Jewish, and he was, but he grew up as a Catholic his whole life. It's the most fascinating story. She landed up going on, if any of you know Megan Kelly, on her program, and I highly recommend, their book's been written on it now. I highly recommend, if anyone wants to know about DNA and about how important DNA is, just watch this. And again, as I said, you can just go on the website, and I'm going to send you this file so you can watch the whole thing. And so you can actually see the story and read about it. Or if you go back to, let me just try that. And to this link here, Megan Kelly will just introduce her.
Western Australian homeowners can now join the 2021 no-cost solar program. The government...
So imagine getting your DNA tested and finding out you are not who you think you are. It happened to our next guest, but first, her backstory. Watch this.
I got my results. I got an email saying my results were here, and I looked at them and they were wrong. They were just wrong.
So I think what's relevant to that is to share, to hear other people's stories, and to be able to put something on a website, which you can see is not a straightforward kind of website that I do. Nalibok is another interesting place, because that is where the Bielskis hid during the war. And I was fortunate to go to the commemoration of the Bielskis in the forest. There's only one who survives. And it was just amazing being with a whole bunch of 200 people in the depths of the forest of Belarus. So this is another aspect of Jewish Gen that is very important. It's, I'm not going to go into the file, but you'll see it's like a compendium of facts about a particular town, and you can click on the links. It's got Yisco books, Kahila link, which I run, and there was a very big commemoration 2 years ago with people like Benny from Cape Town, Benny Rabinovitz, Veronica Belling, many others from around the world came, and they built the most beautiful memorial, which was celebrated by people, because it's very important as well that we just don't leave things as they were, you know, in the forest without getting together with people. Okay, so on to the last section here. You can see on the right-hand side, there's Geraldine's, okay, and a great collaboration between us. I think the other website that I would say from a South African point of view that is quite dynamic because of the connections to this Musenburg. Another reason why Musenburg was very important was because Joy Kropman and her team put together the Memories of Musenburg, and that was very much something that went around the world, in Israel, London, here in Australia, in 3 different places, Vancouver, etc. So it's very important. Again, Musenburg is, it looks really good there. I don't know if the boxes look that good right now, but, and also people's stories. So this is very important, is to get people to share their stories. And so if we look at this here, I think that's, so this is one I've just received from Marlene Stanger. And there's the shul, and there's her story about Musenburg memories with lovely photographs, something that Geraldine does excellently. But what I'm saying is that other towns need to look onto those kind of opportunities as well. So we'll just go out of that. And we go on to the next slide. And again, people from all over the world. I mean, we know Sorrel Kerbal in London submitted an article for Musenburg Memories, as did Leonard Weinreich, who, you know, again, is an excellent writer. And people have contributed these at no cost. Just they're able to write, we're able to put pictures with it, and we're appreciative. This is a poster from that Memories of Musenburg exhibition, And there are many of those that are available on a site, as are the posters that came with the exhibition. And again, there are photographs that's like this particular one of 1,000. So we've got all these photographs. So we're happy to share them. This is the most important thing. And this, in summary, because we're getting to the summary stage now. So this is the Musenburg Megillah. As I said, Rabbi Ryan has just been amazing as somebody, as a young man who's got people engaged in telling stories about Musenburg. And in actual fact, I'll just show you one little spot here. I think we click there. And
they would come and clamber on top of you. They wouldn't let you go. But that was what we did, and immense pleasure out of it. And then we also looked after the old age home in Grassy Park. It was unknown, it was unthought of that we would go to areas like that, but we did. And it was before its time, and we looked after the old people there. We used to sing for them at Christmas parties.
Okay, so as with Geraldine, I think using multimedia, using different forms of media to get people together to tell their stories, to share their stories, whether it is video or whether it's in the written form, or just photographs, send us the photographs if you want us to help you put these things together, or if you want to do them yourself, we're happy to help. And this is what this, I think this meeting is that it can be done, and we're happy to guide you if you want our guidance. And you know what, there's a lot of beautiful memories for people, and obviously, hopefully a rosy future. So that's the end of my presentation. And I hope between Geraldine and mine, you get a good idea of what is possible. And certainly don't hesitate to ask. And as I said, I'm happy to share the PowerPoint through the museum. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Eli. Wonderful presentation. I'm now going to invite Leila Bloch, who's the Archivist Chair at the South African Jewish Museum, to share with you what we are doing at the SAJM archives. Over to you, Leila.
Thank you so much. Just checking everyone can see my screen. Here we go. A few years ago, the Jewish Museum was approached by a family who had come across a discarded box of letters found in the Milnerton market for 30 Rand. We gladly took them in, and through the correspondence, we were able to trace the letters back to a certain Arnold Finkelstein, who was a famous fashion designer working in the 1950s, who was writing to his parents. The collection is currently being processed for our new atom-based system, and personal and descriptive, the letters between a son and his parents tell an untold piece of history, like so many of the other diverse collections in our archive. For example, an economic survey of pre-war Europe for Jaime Schauder's master's degree, a well-known figure from Port Elizabeth. Furthermore, a sequence of stories and research from his life can be found in this collection. You can see that each item we receive is titled and catalogued according to the information we receive from the donor. Here's an example of that. The well-known Elsie Menashe, a Sephardic Jew, who spoke to us about her family journey and her dreams of being a dancer. And you can see you can explore her collection here with similar links and titles and formats according to our atom system. In 2018, we had the privilege of interviewing the anti-apartheid activist Dennis Goldberg.
Join and contact, like the people of Eastern Europe and Central Europe who fought the Nazis because of freedom.
These and many other examples demonstrate the diverse range of collections within our archives, which are used to create a comprehensive database of Jewish social history. However, the exact nature of how these collections have come to be and how they are processed at the SAJM archives has changed over the years. And I'm here today in the archive's most comfortable formats, virtual and digital, to hopefully shed some light on this specific type of archive. The Jewish Digital Archive Project, as it was formerly known, started with an initial log of oral history interviews at the Kaplan Center based at the University of Cape Town. It then expanded with the primary aim of documenting specific families within the Jewish community. These were families who had contributed economically or socially to South African Jewish life and South Africa in general. However, in the process of collecting this material, many more stories emerged, with themes ranging from Yiddish theater, medicine, migration, and more. This grew from small towns to big businesses. It seemed clear that many families capturing the social history of the South African Jewish community needed a place to store their material. Thus became the goal of SAJM Archives to document, store, and preserve these memories. More specifically, this developed into a larger project with the aim to digitize this material in a safe and reliable online platform. Over time, a wealth of material has now been collected, and digital records of a range of our items are now housed on what is known as sajmarchives.com, our atom-based website, where high resolutions of versions of all content are securely stored on the museum IT network, and all digital archive material is automatically backed up both on-site and off-site, as well as a web-based cloud system. We now have a thriving and dynamic archive project housed within the South African Jewish Museum that incorporates thousands of these digital records, photos, family films, documents ranging from birth certificates, passport, family memoirs, and family trees, as well as first-person oral history interviews. And here are a few more examples. One of our communal collections, such as the Sisterhood Temple Israel collection. And of course, our film collection. I'll play this for you so long. We don't usually keep all the film online, but we do put a selection, and per request, we can access the rest of the collection, but we do give glimpses into the collections that we receive, such as this. Our large Lithuanian and surrounding towns collection includes photographs taken from towns in Eastern Europe that exist for years prior to and during the first half of the 20th century. And how our website works. Here's an example of Atom. Our fully functional website generates local and international traffic where users can and do provide feedback on content and structure from a variety of perspectives. The website itself is designed in such a way as to make all content easy to find, and every piece of material that we receive is searchable through a number of different fields or categories. And it's quite, you can either do a very basic search in our browse function here, such as or you can do a more advanced search if you have a specific date, place, or location. And we've also created a how to navigate instruction manual, which encourages you to generate synonyms, phrases, anything that will help you with your search, which can be found in the quick links section on our website. As already alluded, the digital archive's benefits extends beyond the mere preservation of materials. It has also now become a locus and source from which historians, researchers, and indeed anyone interested can draw upon. However, it should also be noted that in terms of genealogical inquiries, we will likely to direct you to the other sites, some of which are mentioned today, such as the SA Jewish, and others such as the SA Jewish Roots Bank and National and Institutional Archives. Moreover, the archive has also been a significant resource for supplementing exhibition material as well as documentary film. We do our best to store material at the best digital quality and are often approached by filmmakers, most recently for example, on a documentary project on Boer Europe, bringing life to this material, making it a living archive. I must stress that physical archival material is not something we keep. At the Kaplan Center, specialized climate-controlled archiving space is made available for physical objects or documents related to Jewish life and history in South Africa of particular historical significance. So a bit about the system that we chose. It's called an atom-based archive system, and our archival site stands for Access to Memory, a Canadian-based software system aligned with international archive systems used by archivists, librarians, and supported by software developers. It is a web-based open source application for standard-based archival description and access in a multilingual, multi-repository environment. Okay, so based on the overwhelming amount of material and the various approaches, we have created a guidebook or instruction manual, which is made available to the public for anyone who wishes to contribute their family history to the archive. Basic instruction guidelines have been drawn up and collated into a guidebook. We also are able to direct you to specialists who can help with scanning, digitization, and if you need help creating your family collection from scratch, I'm sure there are lots of people with albums and family photographs, and we have a team of interns and volunteers who are trained in the Atom system who can help on all levels. So it really depends how extensive you want to be involved in your archival project, and whether it's a selection or with rigorous historical research. It is aligned with the Atom system, and we will guide you in that structure. That's what we provide, a structure. And the deal with the museum is that we can use these communal resources in various forms, for example, in exhibitions. So if you want to know more about that, you can contact us at the museum. And I guess I want to end off by saying that conventional wisdom states that archives as institutions are guardians of truth. Archives as records contain the pristine evidence of past acts and historical facts. However, meaning can be derived from the archive in so many ways. Born out of an urgent need to preserve communal history, we realize that each item that comes in is in itself a vital piece of history, but kept alive this time through virtual and digital platforms. Part of the attraction of our particular archive has been the amount and diversity of material we've collected over time. Thousands of photographs, films, voice recordings, videos, and documents have been gathered from families around Southern Africa and the world. Featured in these collections are a wide range of memories and experience of Jewish South Africans. Ongoing collection of oral history interviews continues to provide a wealth of fascinating historical narrative from those members of the Jewish community eager to share and pass their stories from one generation to the next. Each discarded letter, photograph, even the types of handwriting found in old lecture notes offer the potential to be a glimpse into forgotten moments from our shared pasts. It may not seem relevant at the time, but in fact could illuminate a particular period of social history at a later, more reflective stage. The archive thus becomes a place where letters are preserved, where material is now stored correctly, where people can network, establishing new and preserving old connections from the past. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leila. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed our 3 presentations. I'm going to go through a couple of questions, and then thereafter you are welcome to still ask a few more as we go along. So the first question is for you, Eli. It's from Veronica Belling, and she'd like to know how many South African towns and cities are currently on Kahila links.
Okay. Well, I know I do 21, and I think there are about 3 more. Or Uppington and Vryburg, correct? And the others are from the big cities to the small towns, so about 24 altogether.
Thanks, Eli. Another question also from Veronica is to you, Geraldine. Veronica, I know, has a special interest in Yiddish and Yiddish theatre. So she wants to know if you have any information on your site about Yiddish theatre troops coming through Kimberley.
Veronica, I don't know about it at all. I am not a primary researcher. I'm not a historian. I am a middleman. I'm the person who receives the information, maybe in scraps and little pieces of information, and I put it together as a narrative with pictures. I may do a little bit of extra research, but I'm not I'm not a genealogist and I'm not a researcher. I'm a creator rather of something that looks nice and reads nice, if you see what I mean. My interest in Yiddish, nevertheless, is very great. I have established a course, a 1-week course called Otazoi in London University, as part of when I was the founder director of the Jewish Music Institute. We started a Yiddish course, 1 week, just for people to put their toe in, because they're not prepared to go and spend 3 weeks in Vilnius or wherever, you know, but just want to taste it. And this has now been running for 20 years with capacity. People love it. And as the teacher says, by the end of the week, you'll be dreaming in Yiddish. So yes, I'm very interested in Yiddish. We did a wonderful event about the King of Lampedusa, which was something that the Zelnicke family produced, but that's another story. So yes, I'm interested in Yiddish. And the other thing is that my grandfather wrote letters to his wife in Lithuania when he had left in 1899 and she only came out in 1903. And all those letters were preserved because she brought them back, and they have been translated by Sorrel Kerbel's father, and they are on the website. If you go to my page on the website, you know, people are asking me questions. It's all there. Read the website. Go to my story. You'll find the links to my parents, my grandparents, these letters that were in Yiddish, everything. Thank you.
Thanks, Geraldine. Yeah, I think just to underpin that, we've just given you guys a taste, and there's a lot more on the websites where you can actually get more information. The next question is from Helen Joannides, and she asks really to you, Geraldine and Eli, to what extent are photos and videos and the stories and so on that are on your sites linked to traditional archives, and particularly with regards to the preservation of these records as software and technology changes? Just to say something along those lines, the Atom system that we're using here at the museum, which Leila mentioned, is designed specifically to counteract this this problem of technology changing and the access and ability to find these things sort of dropping off the internet. So Eli, perhaps are you the best placed to answer that?
Well, you know, the thing is that when we work like Geraldine and myself, you must see how difficult it is to get information out of people, but she manages quite well. And if you compare the other cities and towns that we do, it is, don't send in stuff. But the stuff we send in,
I've lost Eli. Can anybody else hear him?
No.
Okay, maybe we'll come back. Maybe we'll come back to him. Hopefully, that's not too long. Oh, there we go. Got you back, Eli.
Okay. So what I was going to say, this information, photographs, stories come from people's private collections, and that's the important thing for us, is that we find other information that isn't available in libraries and museums and so on.
Okay, and in terms of the preservation of these records on the Kahila links or the Jewish Gen site, is it automatically backed up and kept up to date with technology?
Well, we hope so with Jewish Gen.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, they're working with Ancestry, so I would imagine they've got good backups on their things. Yes.
Thank you. The next question is from Alison Rosotto. Alison, you asking about Cantor Immerman, who was a famous blind cantor here in Cape Town. Geraldine, she wants to know if he was not originally from Kimberley. While I'm not certain about that, I know, Alison, there is a film about him that was made by Lisa Chiat. I think you can find it on YouTube. If not, just contact the museum. We'll send you the link. That gives his whole history and story. He really was an iconic person here in the Cape Town community, teaching many people their bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah portions. Geraldine, do you know if he came from Kimberley?
I don't know if he came from Kimberley, and I think quite ironically, I'm now very much involved with cantors, and we've set up with Alex Klein, who's on this thing, the European Cantors Association. We run all sorts of things. But when I was a child in Kimberley, I wasn't interested in cantors or cantorial music at all. And we didn't really have a cantor. I was thrilled to find that in 1930, we had Cantor A. Rudy in Kimberley, and somebody sent me a picture of his choir, where many of the people I know are little boys in Cantor Rudy's choir. And that can be seen on the website also. But I don't really know anything about it. There really wasn't a cantor. We had a second rabbi, Reverend Goldberg, who was there for 35 years during my childhood. And he acted as the cantor and the moil and the shochet and everything. He wasn't particularly inspiring, but there you are.
Yeah. If I may just make 2 points. I got married to Jill Reestin at the Garden Shul in 1977, and my late aunt Rachel Rabinovitz, who was a famous pianist, came in with a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and she made a recording of the service. And through all the bumps and lumps of it, I've got friends who are singing choirs, and they say, "Gee, what an amazing choir that was!" With Easy Pats was in the choir, Max Badash was the chazan. And that's the one thing. The other thing I want to say is that I've got a recording at my sister's wedding in 1961 in Johannesburg of Chief Rabbi Louis Rabinovitz making the toast to the families. And that's an absolute gem. So that's the kind of thing that we look for out of people's private collections. Somebody's got a recording, believe it or not. And it sticks, it stays, and people just absolutely love it.
Thanks, Eli. The next question is from Claudia Brody. Claudia, I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit, but essentially what Claudia is asking is, do you guys get the sense through your Kahila Links pages that that the South African Jewish community is something that is almost treated as of the past, like we treat shtetls and the stories of Litvak Jury? Or does it feel something that is more contemporary and some things that are being actively kept alive?
Hear and read what Rabbi Silberhaft has to say, to know that a place like Kroonstad may have one Jew left, and yet all those years ago it was a vibrant community. So I think the country towns are certainly one thing. In terms of the city, we're very jealous in Australia of the ruach and the community spirit in Cape Town and Joburg. I don't know much about Durban. So it's a bit of a mixture. But the important thing is, if you want to find your history, the important thing is you can read it out of a book, but you can also then go to websites like Kimberley and really feel. And I mean, as I said, Geraldine's also done the Zoom, and you've seen that with Musenburg as well. So you hear people telling their stories. They're lovely. They're amazing. Can't think of anything better to do is to listen to people compare stories from a molecule you're in. There's my Yiddish.
Geraldine, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm not really. I mean, just remind me what the question is.
Well, really, I think what Claudia wanted to know is to get a sense of, does it feel as though we are capturing a history of a community that is no more, or do we feel that it's still something that we're quite active in working with a lot of contemporary stuff as much as the past as well?
Well, look, some places there are people and some places they're not. But as I say, I'm not looking at nostalgia. I'm looking at commemorating people and events, and I think that's valid whether there are people there or not. As long as people enjoy it. I mean, there needs to be feedback. I need to know that people that enjoy the website and look forward to the newsletters, and they write back to you and say so, because otherwise it's of course it's a labor of love, but you can get a bit tired of it if nobody's responding. But because people are responding, and because people do enjoy it, and then they find their own stories. And what is really special is they love those stories that I've created out of their bits and pieces to give to their children and their grandchildren, because they now feel they've got something that they didn't have before.
I would like to say, from my point of view, living in Australia, in Perth, Australia, that when one goes back to South Africa and Cape Town, that spirit that you get going to the gardens or the Green and Sea Point Shul, often you don't find in Australia, because Litvaks had something very special about their services, their way they conducted themselves. And it was very...
I think, Eli, we lost you again, just as you were getting to your point.
Oh my goodness. I said, am I back?
Yeah.
Okay, so I say it's a very rich environment that we grew up in, even in the little country towns. And I'm particularly jealous when I come back to a place, like Australia, which doesn't have that, because they weren't Litvaks. I've got this big argument going on because 53% of Australian Jews are born in Australia. 11.5% are born in South Africa. Okay, and there's very little evidence of that, except actually in shuls sometimes, where you have a South African community, and then you have the chazonas, and you have, that kind of stuff. But Polish and Hungarian Jews aren't the same. That's all I can say.
Okay, moving on, there's a question for you, Leila. You alluded to the fact that we don't take physical collections, and that these collections go to the specialist climate-controlled archive at the Kaplan Center. Veronica would like to know, what is the criteria where we make those kind of decisions as to what would go into the Kaplan Center archive? Just to say, Katie Guerin will be presenting specifically about this in our final session as well, but maybe you just give us a brief overview later.
So I think if a particular collection comes in that is of historical significance in its physical form, that would definitely go to the Kaplan Center. And look, we are moving to a place where we're wanting to collect more focused collections, because while we do have a home for family photographs, we wanted to make a place where anyone really who has memories and material need can store their collections within our archive. But we are moving to more focused, research-based collections, like JP will speak about the Woodstock and Salt River Hebrew Congregation, or the Union of Jewish Women, which will exist in themselves on the website. So that is how we decide on collections going forward, while simultaneously providing people, people at home with their family photo albums just wanting to make digital copies. But the key difference is that we don't have the facilities to keep physical material.
Thanks, Leila. Alex, you asked where you can get a list of cantors who serve to the communities and whether we have that in our museum archives. I can't answer that offhand, Leila. I don't think we do, but that really is the point of this whole this whole event, really, is to create a network of people who may be able to answer those questions for you. Geraldine, you may have those kind of answers. Eli, the same. And I'm sure there's a question out there, an answer will be found.
I think JP Burke has made lists of ministers in South Africa and cantors, because he's always writing to me about that kind of person. So I think that there is starting to be that. And the South African Jewish Music Center, which we're just resurrecting, is going to start a project on digitizing South African Jewish choral music, particularly synagogue choral music, of which there is such a rich tradition, which I'm certainly trying to help them get going.
Yeah, I think.
And in fact, sorry, Eli, just to interrupt, you're quite right about JP, who will be presenting next week as well. And that's a question that you can put to him then. I'm sure he'll give a much more detailed answer as well. Sorry, Eli.
I think Saul and Roy on the SA SIG had done that some time ago, of a list of rabbis and cantors. So, and I see Alex wanted some recordings that I assume he's asking me. that I was talking about. So if we get his email address, I'll send him whatever I know. Thank you.
Just on that, folks, we will send out all the information that you and the presentations that we did today, as well as the others from the other sessions. The idea is to build a network, and if you are happy with us sharing your contact details and your areas of interest, we will ask you in the email and we will share it out thereafter. Saul, who is, as Eli said, I think the grandfather of South African Jewish genealogy, really, laid the groundwork for much of the work that's followed thereafter and is still actively involved, points out a major problem, which is really that Johannesburg and other major cities and towns where there's been very little work, and what is done is not necessarily a systematic approach. And Saul, I think I have to agree with you, and this is one of the things that we are trying to overcome by building this network. And also to the, this is something that we've come across in the museum, and as you will rightly know, building archives, building networks and databases is a really time-consuming, never-ending work. And it really comes down to resources, and resources at the moment in this regard are quite thin on the ground, and we rely on people who volunteer, such as Eli and Geraldine and many others. This one has a question for you, Leila. She says she has relatives, the late Ethel and David Goldberg, who are members of the Garden Shul, and she's wondering if we have anything on their family history in our archives. I'm not sure if you can answer that offhand.
I would start by searching under surname, place, date on our website, maybe approaching the shul as well. And otherwise, yeah, all the other Jewish Roots Bank. And part of the research of that is you're going to have to draw on all these various links. It's a bit of, to try and find the exact name and date to be as specific as you can. Yeah.
And I was actually going through the questions and answers here. I see, Alex, that Saul answered your question directly with regards to the list of cantors. So that's lovely being able to do this so quickly and innovatively online. Thank you, Saul, for answering that.
Yeah. If I may say, just one of the key points here is actually we're looking, personally, we're looking for people to send us their recordings that they have hidden away in a couch that, has been sat on for the last 20 years, and they forgot there was something underneath, like a cassette or whatever. And that's the thing, is that it's up to now individuals to try and contribute to this history, not necessarily to try and find it in the museum or in an archive, but that people have got rich resources themselves, and they just got to change their paradigms, shift their paradigms to think about sharing that with people. It's not going to harm them. It's not going to, they're not going to make any money out of a bit of a chazonist recording of Johnny Gluck, in Johannesburg. If they've got a recording, share it. That's the message.
I have to agree with that. I think that brings us to the end of all our questions, and also more or less to the end of our time as well. So I'm just going to give each of our panelists an opportunity to make any last remarks. And then, of course, everybody make sure same time, same place next week on Wednesday, where we'll do another 3 presentations and 3 different approaches as well to building communities online. Maybe to close off, Geraldine, do you want to some closing remarks?
Thank you. I see Itamar Shine has said, is there a Kahila link for Bloemfontein, and how can I start or contribute to such a one? I hope, Itamar, that what I've said to you today tells you exactly how to start to do that, and I'll be very happy to talk to you or anybody else who feels that I can help. But I would suggest just listen to what I've said again. It's on the Facebook page. And that's how you start it. You have to have the driver, you have to have the communication, the email list, and a webmaster. And that's all there is to it.
Well, Itamar, as somebody who is one of the last generation to grow up Jewish in Bloemfontein, I'll be more than happy to help. So feel free to get in touch.
Well, can I say something as my closing statement?
Absolutely.
I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but there is a Bloemfontein Kahila link. And there has been for a while. The thing is to try and get people to contribute. And that's where the rub is You've got to just come together, send us what you have, even if you don't think it's valid, photographs, music, stories, and we can do something about it. That's it. Sorry, just one other point. Don't send it to Facebook, because one of the problems with Facebook, it gets up there and then it's gone. You never see it again. It's got to be put somewhere where you can actually reference it at a later stage. Hey, Geraldine.
Well, that's the thing. You see, the website is the repository of the information. The Facebook is the fun part. It's the communication. It's part of the community. It's all important. But ultimately, if you want something to remain and be there, hopefully forever, who knows where technology is going, then the website, I believe, is what's necessary for a community. And I think that the resources that the Kaplan Center and that Leila has demonstrated at the museum are enormously helpful and useful. But, you know, depending on what you want to do, but to create a community is lovely. And, you know, I encourage everybody to do it.
We can ask Jeff Bezos to take it into space and put it in his spaceship and keep it up there.
Thanks, Leila. Anything you want to close with?
Yeah, just to respond to Claudia's question about the past and the present working together. These records are used in a very contemporary way. We're keeping memories alive with these records, and they form a very vital part of our history, with people with a great need for people to keep storing them and reflecting on them in the present. So yeah, it's wonderful that we are where we are, and we look forward to seeing more collections coming in.
And I think that that wraps us up for today, folks. We'll see you again next week. As I said, we will share all these resources. We'll create a list as well. If when we reply to you with that list, please let us know whether you are happy for us to share your particular interests and connections, and we will build a network out of that. And hopefully by the time our 3 sessions are over for this first iteration of the Community History Online, we'll have built a nice network of people working in different spaces where we can share resources, share information, and really, as it is in the title, build a community online that is interested and supportive of South African and Southern African Jewish history. So I thank you for joining us on behalf of the museum and of the Kaplan Center, of Geraldine and Eli and Leila. Have a lovely day or evening or morning, wherever you happen to be in the world. And we shall see you back here next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Gavin. Thanks so much to Gavin.